All right, may I have your attention, please? We're getting ready to start now. We are going to start you off with a video from an esteemed British actress. I'm Paul Verkammen, by the way. I'm the communications director for ShelterBox. If I look familiar, my parents had a bar over there. I also spent 26 years at CNN. Anyway, let's go and take you somewhere else. How many of you are Dame Judi Dench fans? Let me see. All right, well then there's no need for me to say another word.
Everyone deserves a place that they can call home. Don't you agree? ShelterBox provides life-saving shelter for people who have survived disasters, war, hurricanes, earthquakes. A warm, dry place to sleep gives you somewhere to start again. A place to heal, to cook, to play, to be with loved ones. That's the reason that I've supported ShelterBox since 2011. Will you join me? Please will you share and spread the word?
Good evening. Thank you so much for coming out tonight to celebrate International Women's Day. We've been holding these panel discussions for years. I'm Carrie Murray, and I serve as the president of ShelterBox USA. And ever since I started, we've been holding these. And the reason, really, in the genesis for this was I was reading one day one of the global gender reports, and it was the World Report that comes out every single year. And I saw a statistic, and it said 275 years to closing the global gender gap. And I thought to myself, I must have that wrong. It can't be 275 years. And it was. And fast forward 5 years ago, it was 217 years, and fast forward to today, it is 131 years to reaching global parity for gender. And that's going to be far too long. We have to do better. And so we started convening these events each and every year. So International Women's Day is celebrated tomorrow. It's on March 8th. And we hold these events to really celebrate the achievements of women. The social achievements, cultural achievements, the economic achievements, and the political achievements of women. And while we've made some progress in healthcare and education, we're falling far behind in political contributions as well as economic. And unfortunately for women, even here in the US, we earn 82 cents for every dollar that a white non-Hispanic man earns. And that hasn't changed in 20 years. So we're here today to really celebrate the achievements of women, but to reaffirm our commitment to coming together, to talking about these things, and to really advancing and closing the global gender gap. So our children and our children's children could maybe see it in their lifetime. So again, I serve as the president of ShelterBox USA. We are a global humanitarian relief organization that is tackling one of the biggest issues that's plaguing our world today, and that's global displacement. There are more people displaced from their home today than any time in recorded history. It's 114 million people who are displaced from disaster situations like earthquakes and flooding, typhoons, cyclones. It's people who are displaced by violent conflict. Actually, this is the #1 driver of displacement. So what you're seeing now, obviously, in Gaza, in Ukraine, tens of millions of people displaced every single year because of conflict. And then the impacts of climate. And that is also driving displacement and just making matters even worse. And so as a global relief organization, we focus on one of your basic needs. So our basic needs are around food, water, and shelter. And at ShelterBox, we focus on the provision of emergency shelter and essential supplies to keep you alive in the aftermath of losing everything. So the basic premise, and what you can see on the screen, was 24 years ago, we started off with a singular shelter box. And the premise is, what are the things you need to sustain your life if you lose everything in an instant and you're forced to flee your home? And unfortunately, even here in our community, many people know what that feels like. They know what it feels like to be evacuated. Other people here, I know what it's like to lose your home. But fortunately, there is a safety net. And while this was an awful traumatic experience here at home, many people started to rebuild their lives. It took months and years, but the rebuilding is happening. But in so many places around the world, there isn't that safety net. And maybe no other organization, shelter organization, other than ShelterBox is coming for you. And I've seen this over and over again. So the center of gravity for what we do is the provision of an emergency shelter. It takes lots of different shapes and sizes. One of the most common shelters that we provide is actually outside. It's the standard relief tent. It looks like a recreation tent. It's not. It's made for humanitarian purposes. It is the place a family will call home for the months after a disaster. We just put up, and I was part of the team that was in Morocco late last year. We put up thousands of these shelters in the high Atlas Mountains, and this is where people are living in through the winter months till they can start the rebuild process. So the shelter is vital. It is the first step in the recovery process, and if you've been displaced, you know that your life stops until you have a roof over your head. So you're not going to work, you can't go to school, and so this is first and foremost what we do. But then we do the other supplies that are vital to set up a household. So you need to cook a hot meal, boil water. We bring stainless steel cook sets in. Restores a real sense of routine and normalcy for a family. We bring in solar lanterns. We've all lost power. So solar lanterns, you can charge your phone, have light. It's essential. Oftentimes you see contamination of the water source. So we have a water purification unit, containers to store clean water, blankets, ground mats, hygiene sets, things like sanitary products. Sometimes we're about to start a project in Gaza. It's female hygiene products. It's ground mats. It's shelters that help really help you repair a home that's been damaged by bombing. So we customize the aid package based on the unique needs of the families and the displacement crisis that they're facing. And so it's always different. So we started with a box 24 years ago, and now it's all customized shelter packages based on where we're going and the needs of those families to meet them in the moment that they're in. So one thing that we know for certain in the work that we do at ShelterBox is that certain people are affected disproportionately, and that is women and children. So of the people displaced in our world, 75% are women and kids, and women suffer disproportionately. They're much more likely to die in a disaster. They're much more likely to experience lack of livelihood, also not be able to go to school. They experience gender-based violence. And so it's very hard for women and particularly young girls. So at ShelterBox, we work and prioritize the most vulnerable. Those are often women. And we bring in teams that help provide training, they help provide tools, and provide the resources to help them rebuild their lives. And that's because women are at the absolute core of community recovery. They not only help repair the lives of their families, they rebuild their communities. And so we remain absolutely committed to helping empower women in the work that we do. So that is a little bit about the work of ShelterBox. The real reason we're here tonight is to engage you in a really important panel discussion. We have some transformational leaders. These women have moved mountains. They've overcome incredible obstacles, and they're here to share their stories with you. And I'm very excited to be able to welcome what I believe is our very best panel we've ever had for Women's Day. It is our largest, so I'd like to welcome you all to the stage for the 2024 panel. Hi. Hi. Take a seat. Thank you. Welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
We have our biggest turnout ever for International Women's Day. It was several years ago when we first started. We were begging people to come to this, and we thought, if we build this, will people come? And if you look around the room, it's now standing room only. So it's a testament to just the amazing folks that we have this year. I'd like to introduce you to them first, and then I'm going to introduce you to them individually. So first, Ann Beagan, Nala Kayali, Eileen Boris, Catherine Reitman, and Janine Berridge. And I am going to start with you, Ann. So Ann is a very unique combination of talents. She is a former FBI special agent turned Hollywood producer. I'm still not certain after meeting with Ann she doesn't still work for the FBI, but sure. But Ann spent 23 years with the nation's premier federal law enforcement agency. Fresh out of Quantico, she reported to duty in New York City. Right when 9/11 hit, she became and filled the position of the key liaison for the FBI to the mayor's office, handling the post-terrorist attacks. Over time, Ann has transitioned her skills and took her real-life stories of working in the FBI to Hollywood. And she has built a decade of experience managing long-form media projects. She's worked on some very high-profile feature films. She's worked on things like The Wolf of Wall Street, Mr. Robot, The Wizard of Lies, The Informer, and so much more. Ann, thank you for being here. I would love for you to share your why. What motivated you, and when were you motivated to apply to the FBI? Why did you do this? And then what was the process it took for you to become an FBI agent?
Oh, well, thank you for having me, first of all, and I'm honored to be here with this distinguished panel. And I love learning about ShelterBox. I hope I can contribute more going forward now that I know about it through you, and thank you for all you do. Sorry that I don't look anything like my picture. It's not there anymore. I had a terrible stylist for one day, and I was blonde, and it was picture day, and I don't look like that, so... Anyway, it's really an honor to be here. My journey into the FBI began when I was a freshman in high school. I was 14 years old, and for anyone in here, well, I guess this college age, you're older, but very impressionable age, and I was sitting in my political science class, and a female agent came in and was a guest speaker. She walked in the room, and she had on a Chanel skirt suit with a patent leather belt, her gun, her badge. And it was like the rest of the kids in the room just burst into flames, and it was just me and her. You know, in the movie version of this, it's like crash, boom, on my face and her face, and I'm like, that's what I'm gonna do. So, you know, this was 1984, there was no internet, and I got home as soon as I could. And I wrote the FBI, how do you become an agent? And they sent me back a packet. And I put myself on that path, skipping through this because there are 4 different ways really that you can primarily be qualified to be in the FBI. And I got in 10 years later when I was 24 years old. I very much, just not to prolong this answer, but I was very young when I applied, and the average age of a new agent is 30, and you very much have a former life, family experiences, and I was 23 when I came knocking, and they were like, go away, you're too young. And I just wore that guy down. I was like, nope, I'm not going away, I'm not going away. And he said, here's the thing, you know, you don't have the age and the experience that comes with age, and I'm worried you're not going to make it through the process, the different levels. And I said, no, you don't understand. Growing up in Vermont, in the dirt roads of Vermont, going to a farm school not only gives you the tools for life, but the whole tool shed and the farm. And he took a chance on me, so keep going, girls. Don't take no ever for it. Just don't.
And I have to imagine mostly male-dominated at the time you joined.
10% women when I got in. Now we're flirting with 20. Not acceptable, but I'm doing what I can. I'm creating shows about the Bureau that I'm giving women roles that men have always had in the FBI, so that we're going to start to see a change in Hollywood, and then let's hope it follows in real life.
I love it. Awesome.
Thank you.
Nala Kayali, it has been such a privilege to get to know you. Nala was a Palestinian refugee. She made her way with her family to Syria as a child, and at 16 she was married, and she had 2 babies by the age of 20, and found herself at 16 in the United States, making a life for herself. And it wasn't an easy path. It was not an easy life for her here. As she took many jobs, she found herself divorced and a single mother. And she started what I believe to be is one of the best culturally sensitive social support networks, nonprofits in the United States. It happens to be in Southern California. It's called Access California, and it serves refugee and immigrant women. And she is transforming the, I think, immigrant and refugee experience through her services, wraparound services. But Nala, I'm wondering, you've devoted your life to helping people like you. Can you educate us, help us understand the differences of refugees versus immigrants first, the struggles that they face when they get here to the United States, and why you created Access California?
Well, I created Access California. It was a personal story of mine, which I'll get into it. But the difference between immigrants and refugees, there's a big gap between them and big difference, because immigrants, they come by choice. They like to reunite with their families. They come for education. They come for better life, and it's a choice. Where refugees, they arrive here by force. And by force of war, persecution, different political opinions, natural disasters, and they end up here. And most of the refugees, they come, they don't have families here. So what we started Access California Services to empower the immigrants and the refugees. So barriers are completely different between immigrants and refugees. Immigrants, they have barriers, but they overcome their barriers much faster than refugees. The refugees, they come with many barriers and mental health barriers. They don't understand the system here, where immigrants, they have families and support, whether it's university or whether it's a family, reunited. And you can see it in the airport when they first arrive. If they're immigrants, they have somebody that they welcome them, they're happy, they're very happy here. But with immigrants, you see them that their head is down, they're looking for hope. And with so many barriers for refugees, housing, healthcare, they don't have credit, they cannot rent an apartment, they cannot get into their first job. But with immigrants, they have some type of family support or financial support. But refugees they have many barriers, language barriers sometimes. And we try at Access California Services to overcome all their barriers, to get them into the first, at least, employment. So we do a lot of full assessment for them, and we try to meet them where they are, and we develop a resume for them. And for women, many women that they arrive here, they never worked before. So we try to help them to get into the workforce. And we have an amazing program that we are so proud of. We've been doing it since 2002, where we teach women how to open their home daycare. And we teach them 92 hours. And through that class, they learn parenting, they learn budgeting, they learn marketing, they learn CPR, they learn, and we help them after they finish and they graduate from our class. And last week we had the graduation for this year. We were so happy, and most of the women, it's their first certificate in life. You should see, women are crying when they first receive their certificate. And they bring their families, their children to watch them. And women empowerment is very, very important. And that class is not only for women. In some of the classes, we see some men attending this class, so they can have it as a family business, which is great. And from our classes, there are over, I can say, hundreds of daycare opened. And we teach them how to market, and we help them to develop the flyers. We help them, but in our office, they have a full services that we can help them. We have immigration services, we have case management, we have health access, we have mental health department, we have English as a second language, we have computer classes, we have so many classes. We provide over 100 services a day. And with that, we serve over 13,000 unduplicated clients per year. And I can tell you, over 80% of our clients, women, and women of head of household, that they are the producer for their family, which we are amazed to see women successful. And we want the immigrants and refugees be successful. But I can tell you they come with many barriers, but refugees are resilient. And they always want to work, when they want to provide to the family. And throughout our experience with refugees, that I can assure you, no refugee become homeless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They want to work, they want to add to the society, and they're taxpayers after 3 or 4 months. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
we place them in jobs, and we counsel them while they're working. We help them to sometimes evaluate their education. So it's really, really important. Refugees, they bring a lot of assets, and they add to the society. They're not barriers to the society.
And Nala, what you've built is truly extraordinary. I went down to visit a few weeks ago, and it was one of the happiest, most hopeful places I've ever been. And that is why, back in 2014, President Obama has bestowed on Nala the Champion of Change Award as an advocate and leader.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So next up, we have Eileen Boris. Eileen has devoted her life to the study of race, gender, with a focus on women's labor rights. As a graduate student in the 70s at Brown, Eileen was part of a collective that developed the first women's studies classes. She started to focus on women workers as part of the Chicago Women's Liberation Union, and she helped launch the film Union Maids. In 2001, after she spent 14 years at Howard University, a historically black college, and she also spent some time at UVA. She came to UCSB as the Hull Chair to advance the understanding of women, gender, and social justice. She was the first endowed chair in the field at the University of California, educating the next generation of scholars and activists. I know you've been a tireless advocate for the rights of domestic workers, often home care workers, often women of color, who've become the new face of the labor movement. And you've highlighted a lot of the concerns for those women. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, I would like you to tell us about this picture of you. When is that picture from, and what are you doing there, Eileen?
Is this on?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you for having me, and it's just wonderful to see all of you out here for International Women's Day, which began as a socialist holiday, actually, and it wasn't until the 1960s when women's liberation took it up. So that's my little history lesson for today. That photo is, I'm like 31 years old, I think. It's in the late spring of 1980. And I'm part of the DC area Feminist Alliance. And we're protesting the Supreme Court, which is either about to or just came down, yeah, memories, with a decision that said women might have a right to abortion, a la Roe v. Wade, but it doesn't mean we have to pay for it. It was a case called Harris versus McRae. And so, I mean, let me just read you what they said. They said that a constitutional entitlement to the financial resources to avail herself of a full range of protected choices, And so it upheld something called the Hyde Amendment, which said you couldn't use government money, so women that are on Medicaid couldn't pay for their reproductive health. It was because women were not considered a suspect classification under the law. So we were protesting, and I think we made ABC News. I don't remember what I said, but probably I said something that to the extent that if we can't control our bodies, that all the other rights didn't mean anything. And that some women could have privilege because of their class or race, but other women couldn't. And if you can't pay for things in this capitalist society, you ain't gonna get it. But I do remember, thank you, we did a chant, not the church, not the state. Women decide their fate, and black, brown, and white, abortion is a woman's right.
Thank you, Eileen. We're going to come back to this book that you brought me. It's one of many that you've written, but I'm excited to share that. Next up on our panel, I'm very excited to introduce you to Catherine Reitman. She is it's been interesting because I did an interview today about the panel, and they said, well, who's on your panel? And I said, well, we have a comedian and a producer and a writer and an actress. And they're like, wow, that's an amazing panel. I go, no, that's one person. She is the creator of, I think, one of the most honest and funny shows I've ever seen. It's called Workin Moms. It's now in its 7th season on Netflix. Yes. It was ranked the 3rd most watched series globally the month of its release, and it's on the top 10 watch list. She's also widely recognized for her roles on the ABC hit series Blackish, for which she also directed an episode, and also FX's It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Catherine, we're going to ask you a question in a second, but what I'd like to do for anyone who maybe hasn't seen this yet, roll the tape so we can see a scene. I have a sense that many people in this room have felt that moment that Kate felt in that scene. Catherine, tell us what moved you and motivated you to create Workin Moms?
Hi, guys. First of all, thank you so much for having me on this highly esteemed panel. I told my friends who are here, hi, guys, that I feel highly inadequate. And I'm in awe of all of you. You, I don't know yet. We'll see, won't we? We'll see. I made Workin Moms because my now 10-year-old, oh my God, 10 years ago he was born, and I went back to work too quickly. I say too quickly because I had postpartum depression. And even 10 years ago, which is wild, postpartum depression had such a stigma that it doesn't have now. It wasn't a conversation, you hid it. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure women still do. But 10 years ago, for example, I was in a Mommy and Me group, and I said, guys, I don't know what it is. I'm so scared of driving with my son in the car. I feel like I'm gonna crash. And they all kind of stared at me, and I said, and then I imagine crashing, and it's kind of a relief. And they stared at me, and they were quiet like you guys are. And then I said, I don't want to die. I'm not suicidal. I I want a break. I want like a 7 to 10 medicated break where I know my child's in good hands, and I want it to be excusable. I don't want to feel guilt or shame because I'm in such bad shape in the hospital that she must stay there. And I remember feeling the room get very quiet, very eerie, and they shifted, the administrator of the Mom Yummy group shifted the topic to baby yoga. I swear to God. Swear to God that happened. And after the class, I got back in my car, which I was very scared to drive with Jackson, and I did not crash, never did, thank God, and got home and felt like, okay, this is something I keep to myself. This is something I don't talk about. It's one of those great social lessons that women feel all the time. You get with your friends and you go, oh, hip check, I'm not supposed to talk about that. This is weird. And I got a job 6 weeks later, and it was in Philadelphia. It was shooting a little indie movie, and it happened to fall over my first Mother's Day as a mom. And so Jackson was at home with his highly capable father, and probably a nanny, and because I'm very lucky and I've always had that. And it was Mother's Day, and I've always hung with I do a lot of improv comedy, and improv comedy is a serious boys club, and this was no different. I was on set and I was surrounded by these guys, and they start fucking with me. They start, can we swear? Is that okay? Eileen, is that cool? All right. If Eileen says it's fucking cool, then...
Fucking cool.
I'm sitting with these guys, and they start teasing me. Mother's Day comes up, and they say, oh, is it hard to be away from your son on Mother's Day? I was like, okay, yeah. And they were like, do you want us to write a card on your behalf? Should we sign it from the nanny? Well, is your son calling the nanny mom yet? And this wild moment happened, very similar to what you just witnessed on the show, where I felt what I now call all the colors. And it wasn't just sad, because it was oddly funny. Did you feel when you guys all laughed when I first cried? So that's the moment I'm talking about, where it's not just tragic, and it's not hysterical. There's something weird happens where you're feeling all the colors, and it's my belief that really good art, when you feel hell, you could be watching a horror movie, but you're laughing, or you're watching a drama and you can't help but laugh, but you experience all the colors because that's the human experience. And that day was my first introduction, I think, to understanding that. And I called Phil, my husband, and when I got back to the hotel, I was a mess. I cried through the whole scene. It was a disaster. And I told him what happened, and he said, I think you gotta write this down. I think if you're experiencing this, I'm sure other women are. So I wrote 8 scenes. It's called a sizzle reel. If you want to sell a TV show, it's a really helpful tool. You can do it on your phone. And I got my friends together. I wrote the thing. We shot the thing on the weekends. We cut it together. It was about 8 minutes long, and way too long, probably. And anyway, this was the birth of Workin Moms. It was originally sold to FX, where because I had never been a showrunner before, a showrunner is the head writer on a series and the person who makes all the key hires and decisions. Because I'd never been that before, they assigned a really talented male comedian who had done It's Always Sunny and a bunch of other really great funny shows. And I, of course, didn't object, because who was I? Who was I to say, no, this is my experience. The title is Workin Moms. It should be written by a woman. And so he worked with me, and he removed this scene, as well as a few other scenes that sort of became what I believe crucial in showing all the colors of what my working mother's experience. FX eventually passed because it didn't appeal to both of their demos, men. And luckily, because I'm Canadian, let's go Canada. Not bad at all. I took it to the CBC in Canada, which is their broadcaster, their BBC, if you will. And that was 7 years ago, and it got on Netflix, so my whole life changed. Awesome. And then I joined the FBI.
Thank you for sharing. Janine Berridge. Janine is an impact leader in the nonprofit, academia, and philanthropic sectors. She's done so much. She is president of the Giving List Women, an annual print publication, digital publication, philanthropic summit. The first one's taking place here in April, as well as nonprofit leadership seminars. And she has a commitment around intersectional feminist philanthropy to unlock billions of dollars towards improving the world through investing in women and girls. And unfortunately, there's far too few philanthropic dollars put there. We're going to learn about that. Previously, Janine was the co-founder of the Global Lab for Research and Action at UCLA's Luskin School of Public Policy. And she has worked to find bold new solutions, like working to decriminalize sex work, engaging boys along girls in advance to advance gender discussion, and reframing stories about women's work and worth. She, prior to the Global Lab, worked at Plan, which is an amazing international NGO. She worked in Zambia, Malawi, Sierra Leone, and India. You grew up in Wales, and she's proud of her heritage as the granddaughter to a Gambian stowaway, and she is the mother of a 5-year-old daughter who calls herself Tiger. Love that. So, Janine, you've dedicated your career to global development work in the pursuit of gender equality. What motivated you in this pursuit, and why is it so important that you do this work?
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you everyone for coming out this evening. And I'm just feeling really honored and humbled to be in this incredible presence. I'm just one complaint coming after Catherine, the comedian. So we'll have to, this complaint. So as you said, my grandfather was born in the Gambia. So I really merged my passion around global development and gender equality, I think, because of my history, like many of the personal stories we've spoken about today. And so at 21 years old, he got onto a ship from the Gambia, which, if you don't know, it's the smallest African country on the west coast. And we actually didn't know whether this was true or not until I actually visited the Gambia and found family there and actually confirmed that tale, that story. But it was him and a friend of his, and apparently what happens is you hop aboard and you come up while you're on the ship, and then you work your passage. And at the time, the Gambia was a British colony, so he didn't get deported. So we talked a little bit about immigration and refugees, and for my grandfather, it was really about trying to make a life for himself, earn money, and then send that back home. So I spent a lot of my childhood thinking about the lottery of life. I was a really serious child, and I thought a lot about the fact that I was born in the UK and that my grandfather, had he not jumped aboard that ship, when I later went back and visited the compound, the room that he was born in, that's where I would have been. That was where I would have been brought up. And I've had so much sort of access to opportunity growing up in the UK. And I suppose for me, the global development really bug came when I took 2 gap years. If you think you need to take 1, you should definitely take at least 2. There's a lot of countries in the world. And I was traveling all over the world, and I was recognizing how much challenge there was, but also how much opportunity. I love people. I love meeting new communities and getting to know and understand. And so it was when I returned from one of those trips that I was thinking about marrying my sort of skill set with what I was passionate about. And I'd actually been, I'd been sponsoring, so Plan International has a sponsorship program where you can sponsor a child in another country, and I'd been sponsoring a young girl in Indonesia. And so that's where my sort of global development sort of thread came from. And I thought, I want to work for Plan International. So I'm just going to write them a letter. So I did the same. I wrote a letter and managed to get a role there, a 4-week role that later on turned into 5 years. And but I'd say the gender equality comes from, one, being probably the youngest daughter. There's 3 of us, and I spent a lot of my youth saying it's not fair. And why can't I? And I think that, you know, I grew up with a really sort of strong sense of social justice, and with that comes gender justice. And I must say that on my mum's side of the family, I grew up in a, it was a matriarchal family. So my mum actually was raised in a household with her 3 sisters, her cousins, her aunt, her mother, and her grandmother. And it was because my grandmother, who my grandfather met, the Gambian grandfather, they had children very young, they separated, and my mum grew up in this sort of matriarchal family, and I think that I just sort of merged those two together, and I think that's what really, where my sort of career merged and started at Plan International with that sort of gender equality and global development.
Wow. Amazing. Your daughter has an amazing role model. So, Anne, I have so many questions. I've been collecting questions, and I have so many for you, but I'm going to try to consolidate a couple into one. Can you share, you talked to me a lot about taking control of your own destiny. And can you explain some of your work in the FBI, and then what led you to make that transition, how you made that transition to a Hollywood producer? Big career shift.
You would think so, yes. I think what you're referring to is when we had coffee and I was telling you about fate versus destiny and how you can do things in your life to change the path that you're on, which I call fate, and take control of your own destiny. And for me, that was always looking for new opportunities. I was always curious. I would invite myself to meetings that I wasn't invited to. I don't mean in a rude, disrespectful way, like this. If I was walking down the hallway in the office and I saw a meeting going on or someone was speaking, I would stick my head in and see what was happening in there. I would also never say no to an opportunity in the government when a senior asks you to do something. It's called being voluntold. You don't really have a choice, but you can resist, and I never did. And especially with something like 9/11 or another event where there's no playbook, there's lots of opportunity that doesn't exist. There's no box. There's no job that's there. Go fill that. You see it and you fill it, and the next thing you know, you're on this new journey. Halfway through my career in the Bureau, I had a lot of friends in New York who were producers and directors, and I would go to this place called Elaine's. Imagine here in LA, if Craig's and Dantana had a baby, it would be Elaine's. And it was really very much a social club, and a lot of Hollywood people went there. And I would hear them talking, and they thought I was the most fascinating thing ever because there was no one from the FBI in this mix of common people. And I realized that there was a huge disconnect and that they didn't really understand what was going on in the Bureau. And I saw an opportunity to create a position, so I created a position for myself called the Entertainment Industry Liaison. I went out and got cards, and here I am. And I started reading the trades, and I had a friend in the mayor's office who would tell me about permit requests that were coming in, and so I would just reach out and say, you got this thing about, a lot of things filmed in New York then, the tax credits are great. I think they probably suck now, but there was so much going on that I got us very involved, and then I also proactively started thinking of ideas for things. I had a magazine article in Vanity Fair written, and then that woman was on the Today Show. I came up with the idea for a scripted show, which is now 3 on CBS, and I saw the impact that I was having with changing the narrative and getting people to talk about the FBI and understand what it's like, what the sacrifice is like, what the commitment is like, what it takes. It's humans that work in this organization. It's not a bunch of cyborgs, marching around like Men in Black. It's humans with lives and dreams and hopes and fears and flaws, and this is what people need to understand, right? And also that the FBI is on that wall, to steal a Jack Nicholson line, and you need us on that wall. And it's an agency uniquely charged with things like civil rights and public corruption. It's the only agency that investigates those things. You need the FBI, right? We're the good guys. And so I saw an opportunity to leave the Bureau and really lean into this space and take my knowledge and access and ideas and other relationships with other agents and stories and bring them forward into a universe where some of this stuff is better or as good as any writer could ever make up. And so, yeah, it was a little more of a natural transition than it might seem, but that's kind of the journey there.
Well, it's worked, and it's deeply compelling. So I know you have some new things coming out, so excited to see your shows.
Thank you.
Nala, I'd love if you can share with us a moment that you can point to where you decided that you needed to create Access California. What was that moment for you? And when I went down to Anaheim to meet with you, I know you started with a desk, 2 chairs, and someone gave you a $2,000 donation. But what got you to that point where you said, I'm going to do this?
Thank you, Carrie, for asking me this question, because it's so important to have that. You have to believe in yourself that you can do it first. And I needed some help with seeking therapy services, counseling in the community. And in 1998, I went to a therapist where I was struggling from my divorce with 3 children, single mom, just going through a lot. Being a Muslim, I went to the mosque. And every person, they always go to the faith-based organization where they belong. And I felt they understand the background of who I am. They understand my culture, but they could not provide the services, the professional services in counseling to me. So I had to go to a mainstream therapist. And when I went there, I felt we did not connect. There was a disconnection between me and the therapist because she did not understand where I'm coming from, what's my background, how we are attached to the children. And in every culture, mom, they love their children, but in every culture, then they react in a different way. So I felt that they did not understand where I'm coming from. I changed the therapist, and it was the same thing. But I had to take my daughter to a community clinic for immunization, and I felt that clinic is super clean, amazing. They're welcoming people, and there was a pamphlet about the Healthy Family Program because we did not have insurance at that time. And I enrolled my daughter with them, and it was phenomenal. And I said, oh, would be great for my community to bring them into this program. And I felt, okay, where other women they go if they are struggling, what type of services that they need. So I started this organizations with a folding table, folding chair, and milk crate to put the files in it, and with $2,000 to open, and I rented a small office for $150, and I start providing services to the community with health access for this program, and then I start hearing what their struggle. So I end up doing, and I learned how to do from the volunteer center a need assessment for the community, and we did it, and based what they asked for, and I start hearing their struggle, their pain of what they're going through. I decided to start adding programs, and I learned how to get some support, financial support, to add programs, and and I learned that never be shy to ask. And ask for the highest. Because whenever you ask for the highest, you will get something. And I go with confidence that we need it. We need to help the community. We need to help the underserved community. We need to help them. And this is where we added the English as a second language. Because from the pamphlet, if you cannot understand and read the basic English, this is the key to services to help to be where you are. So we do have English as a second language, and our class is full, always. And I always tell the community, this is your key for a lot of services, for your success in our new home here. And this is home for all of us. And we need to be successful. So this is where it did drive me to start Access California Services. I started as one, but now we are 43 staff with 23 languages. Yeah. Over 100 Amazing. Services a day. And it's amazing how we all can work together. Different ethnicity, different language, different culture. We eat together. We share foods together. And the thing is, it's all about preserving dignity and enriching lives. This is our slogan.
Nala?
Yes.
Thank you. It's so moving, and I think what's so inspiring as well is when I went there, 90% of her staff were beneficiaries.
Yes.
And clients.
Yes.
Former clients.
Right.
Nala, can you just tell us quickly about that photo that's right here? What's that picture of?
This is the women empowerment class. This is the daycare licensing, and that's where they received their certificate. Mm-hmm. This is the graduation, and it's really amazing. Amazing. All the staff, they go and wait for that moment when they receive their certificate, and you should see their children and husbands that they come with ties and suits for their graduations, and it's amazing. It's we always say, you know, what we're doing is really great for the community.
Thank you. Amazing. Congratulations.
And congratulations for what you're doing here. Carrie, it's really amazing. We're very humbled to be here, and thank you for what you're doing.
It's a privilege. Thank you, Nala. Eileen. Eileen has written so many books, award-winning books. I'm going to show you one of them. It's one of her most recent books. It's Making the Woman Worker, Precarious Labor and the Fight for Global Standards, 1919 to 2019, Eileen Boris. Eileen, you have worked to raise awareness and seek protection for home care workers, a field dominated by immigrant women. Can you tell us about these workers, who they are, what these workers face every day, the challenges they're up against, and take us inside just the daily life of the people that you're fighting for every day?
Well, you know, the personal is the political, right? And I'd just like to ask everybody, how many of you have hired someone to come into your home as a nanny or a home attendant or a cleaner? Come on, how many people have? And how difficult is it to pay living wages? How essential this workforce is. We learned that during the pandemic, when daycare centers closed down, when many people with family responsibilities, men, women, genderqueer, we had to combine home and wage labor, or what I call in my highfalutin theory, production and reproduction. And yet, we lacked the resources. Well, imagine if you are a Filipina woman who's taking care of an elder who may be moved into a nursing home with no protective gear, and your family back home are dependent on the remittances that you bring. And yet you're told, don't come, you might spread disease. This was what many essential workers faced. And why? Because they're not recognized as real workers. Because care, which we all need at some point in our life cycle, which we give and we receive, the assumption is that it doesn't take skills, that any woman, usually, can do it. Because as a society, we have assigned this labor to mothers and wives and daughters. And yes, I know there's some great men who do this work. And so I got interested in this labor because I grew up with home-based work. My father was an ice cream man, really. And I grew up in a upper middle class neighborhood, Newton, Massachusetts. Some of you might have heard of that place. And yet we were the poorest people. And every Saturday we would roll the pennies that came from the vending machine and the schoolboy events. And my mother was doing all this unwaged labor for the family, both for the business, but also taking care of her brother, of her mother, and of course her children. So being a child of the 60s and of the social movements, I began to understand why home care was so necessary and why we had to value the labor of care.
And I know you're making a lot of progress, and you're working to advance these rights. It's slow going, but it's...
And these are workers that are excluded from so much of the labor law for such a long time. And that book really looks at it globally. And I've learned so much from the activist women around the world who have far less than we do, and yet put their lives on the line. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Catherine, is there a scene, an episode, that you realized when you were making Workin Moms that just related to people and really struck people?
Yeah, I mean, it's wild, right? When the show went to Netflix, not till season 3 actually. So for 3 years I was walking around Canada. Actually, I went to high school here in Santa Barbara. I went to Kate. Let's go, Kate. I thought that might be bigger. Locals. But we moved to Canada because CBC picked up the show. And while we were there, there's not actually, the population of Canada is incredibly small. It's smaller than the state of California. That's true. And didn't learn that till after I got there. And we're making this show, and it's from the, deepest diary of my life. It's so private and so intimate, and I just thought the whole time for 3 years, this is gonna be some indulgent thing that I get to make, and then for the rest of my life I'll talk about at dinner parties, but no one will ever watch it. And because who could relate to this craziness? And sure enough, for the first 3 years, it was like, did we go to school together? Like, no one really knew who I was, what it was. And I would keep coming home to my husband and being like, maybe we'll get another season, maybe we won't. But, look, we're doing it. We're making the thing. And it got on Netflix, and our worlds changed, right? All of a sudden, everywhere we went in the world, people were watching it in their language. And I still cannot believe the amount of people from all over the world who are relating to my very personal, frankly, privileged experience. And there is one scene that I get over and over again, and if you're a fan of the show, you might know the scene I'm talking about. It happens in the pilot episode. It actually happens right after the scene you just saw where I'm in the conference room. I just had Jackson, and I was out for a jog, and I saw bear poop on the ground. Can I say poop, Eileen? I saw bear poop, and I was like, what happens if you run into a bear with your child? How do you deal with this? And I get on the internet, and the internet tells me, I'm not kidding, that you should scream. I'm gonna say that again. The internet told me that if I run into a bear, I should scream at it. And I thought it was the funniest fucking thing I've ever seen. And so I wrote a scene, and I thought it was hilarious. Of course, in my life, this bear was a manifestation of every obstacle that I had come across as a working mother. Every person who said no, or you're not interesting enough anymore, smart enough anymore, sexy enough anymore. All the things that apparently we flush from our system with our placenta. So this bear became this great physical thing that when I scream at it, I felt I was letting out all of my anger and frustration with all the obstacles that were in my way. What I didn't know is that 12-year-old gay boys would connect with it, that 70-year-old men from Chicago would love it, that less so 70-year-old men from Chicago, less. My husband's from there. Whenever I go there, it's more of like, so you went topless, huh? A lot of those conversations. But it does seem to connect with people that aren't just working mothers. It's been an incredible journey, and I believe you have that clip.
Okay, yeah, can we show it? Can we show the scene? So what was that scene about? Tell us.
I mean, from what again, it's just you're coming upon the monster that's getting in the way of what you want, and it's so often we're just walking around and, you know, metabolizing all of these little no's, all of these little horrors that some are big and some are small, and you don't realize till you're lying in bed at 2 a.m. because you can't sleep and you're going, that drove me crazy today. Why didn't I should have said that. I should have said that. Why didn't I say that? Or whatever the little things are that are under your skin that you can't let go, to have a moment where you get to scream at them. It became a battle cry, I think, for a lot of people, that scene. And this show had to happen. I feel very lucky that I got to be at the helm of it. I think it was going to happen no matter what. And in fact, it has happened repeatedly since the show came out. There's so much mom content out there now, right? And it's so fabulous. And I feel really, really privileged that I got to be part of this one.
And so many strong female characters, right? Which there's far few too many of. And you've made a show that's really rooted in these authentic stories. So it's really incredible.
Thank you.
Janine, I would love for you to share your work at Giving List Women and why it's so vital. And I know you shocked me with the statistic. I'll let you share it around philanthropic dollars to causes for women and girls. But share what you're doing at Giving List and what you hope to accomplish.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. I have to say, this show got me through my postpartum anxiety, and I remember that scene so well, and the feeling that that's what I wanted to do like every single day, honestly. So congratulations, and thank you for telling those stories. So the Giving List Women, I think I'm going to start with the statistic, because what we're trying to tackle, because it was shocking to me as someone who's been in this work for a long time. When I say this work, really fighting for gender equality, and being, you know, prior a nonprofit executive director, and when I found out that less than 2% of philanthropic dollars goes to organizations that focus primarily on women and girls, I was shocked. And no wonder it's so hard, right? We've heard it on the stage today. We've heard it about how we need resource, and you know what you can do with your money, and you know where the need is. And so this is both a really big obstacle, and I'd say a challenge, but there's also an opportunity there. And that opportunity comes in the form of, there's actually a huge transfer of wealth coming, and that wealth is actually going to be coming into the hands of a lot of women. And women, there's data, women give differently as well. Women actually do focus more of their funding on women and girls. And so I want to give you that hopeful note as well. And so with that, you know, the Giving List Women, it's, like you mentioned earlier, it's a book, so a publication. It's also a summit and a seminar, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But the book really is bringing to life the stories of organizations, local, national, and global, that are investing in women and girls around the world, but they're also improving the world by investing in women and girls. And that's a really important point, because there's the yes, empowering, uplifting women and girls, but there's also so much what we call the multiplier effect when we invest and focus in women and girls. And so what we see is, we see women investing in their children, in their families. We see them investing in their communities. And, you know, the data is there. And the data is there that demonstrates that actually they increase GDP when we lift up women and girls. So when I see this 2%, and then I hear this opportunity, we've heard it a few times today on the panel, there's a huge disconnect there, right? That there's this huge opportunity. And so with the Giving List Women book, what we are doing is bringing to life the stories of organizations. We want to, raise funding for the organizations. We want to raise visibility for the organizations. But we also want to give examples to the philanthropic community, really great examples of organizations that are innovating, they're disrupting, they're evolving over time. Some of these organizations that have been around for decades, that you see how they've had to adapt with the changes that we're seeing in our world today. And so what we really want to do is we want to uplift those stories, but we want to give the philanthropic community the fact-based justification that no matter what issue you care about in the world, you can improve that by investing in women and girls. And there's some phenomenal examples there. And what we really hope that year on year we can build up this group of organizations in the book. And what we can do is we can really try and nudge that 2% up, and we can help motivate and inspire the philanthropic community to recognize that really directing your money towards women and girls isn't just the right thing to do, it's actually the smart thing to do. And so I'm delighted that the book is going to be brought to life at a summit here in Montecito, April. It's coming up very fast. And what we're really hoping to do there is to bring the different sectors together, the philanthropists, policy leaders, corporate impact leaders, and really give them this fact-based justification, but also provide them with an opportunity to learn from one another and teach. Because I think there's so many new forms of philanthropy that we're seeing that are really, I would say, contributing to transformational change. Even when I hear some of our partners and the way that they are partnering with the nonprofits and how they are, trust-based philanthropy, being partners over time, that's a big one. Not sort of the grant, one on year, one different organization another year, really partnering with them and learning with them, failing with them. We don't talk about failure in the nonprofit sector, and there's a reason why. It's because what happens is our funding goes away. And yet we see the private sector time and time again being able to fail and iterate and improve. And isn't that what we all need to do? We need to fail because it's not failure, it's just learning and opportunity. And what happens is, and I saw it time and time again in my global development work, you get good enough programs. So they're good enough and they're working, but there's things that we could be doing that we could innovate, but we don't try them out. Because if we try them out and they don't work, then our funding goes elsewhere. And so what I am really hoping with this book and the summit, and we have a nonprofit leadership seminar next year as well, which is helping to prepare the leaders of the organizations to be poised for this transfer of wealth. What I'm really hoping is that we can sort of demonstrate the need, the opportunity, but also we'll see these new models that are working and that people will take risks and do long-term partnerships, bigger grants, as well as really what I would say is going under the hood with organizations and being really true partners to them and staying with them over time. So there's a lot to achieve, but we've been blown away by the response that we've had, and it just kept growing and growing, and we've now got sort of 48 organizations featured in the book. We've got a dozen or so interviews with trailblazers and leaders, and we've also got 20 what we call champion partners, who are the intermediaries or the foundations that are funding this work and are really taking a step forward with these innovations.
So exciting. I'm thrilled about this. Thank you. So before we bring up a very special guest, I would love to take a few questions for these amazing panelists. We have a microphone going around, and I'd love, what questions do you have out there? I know we have a lot of students here. I see high school, college. Ladies, gentlemen, what questions do you have for these extraordinary panelists?
Ladies, thank you so much for doing this and contributing your time and efforts. The youth of America is always around us, and you all have taken steps out of your comfort zone. If you could, in 2 sentences, each of you, could you tell the youth that is here tonight how they can believe in themselves and make a difference?
Wow. Who would like to start that?
I'll answer this one, but I feel like it's a theme that I've heard, which is this idea of taking risks and being vulnerable and asking. I think that's really scary. It's scary for everyone, but I think that what we also need to do to enable us to have the confidence to do that, and I've built this up around me, it's what do I call our cheerleaders. And I feel that you need those that are going to be around you when it's really tough, as well as when it's time to celebrate. And the cheerleaders, they can be your friends, they can be your colleagues, they can be your peers. And I think that that's how you have the confidence to say yes, to ask, to write the letter that you think you may get rejected from. And I think that's why, because it's always, you're going to get no's. And the no's just open up other doors. And I think that what you can do is really turn to your community, and your community is all around you, and sort of bring them close and ask for their advice and input and support.
I'll build on that, is that, as I used to say, no man, but we'll say no woman is an island. And so it's really important to have your posse. But it's also really important to follow your passion, because we're depending on you to keep hope alive.
And I can add to that, try your best and keep trying. Keep trying, and don't take no for an answer. Keep trying. And you always be in the front to ask. And when you attend meetings, and I applaud you that if you walk in here and you see a crowd of people talking, just pull a chair and listen and add to the table and add to the decision making, and pull a chair and put it. And that's what I did. And I kept asking for so many things for the community. And we granted a standalone building, and Carrie saw it from the city. It took me 18 years to keep asking. They kick me out of the door, I come back from the window. And I keep asking for the same thing over and over and over. And finally we got it. So don't leave crying. Just believe in yourself. Say, I'm coming back. And you will get what you want. And we are helping the society. We are women, we're very powerful. When we want to do something and put it here, we can do it. Right, thank
you. Everyone has touched on the word no, don't take no for an answer, and no is actually my favorite word. Because everybody knows when I get no, I'm coming back. I'm finding a way over it, under it, through it, or around it. And so don't take no for an answer, because no is easy to say, right? It's the lazy, no. We've never done that before. Oh, okay, well, I'll be back. I look through the window. Then the other thing is, never, girls, look at something and look at the list of reasons that you can't do it. Look at the reasons why you can do it. And think outside the box. There's not a box for everything. Never forget that. Now on to Catherine.
I mean, they've all covered it pretty well. I would say I did talk once about before you get the no, before you got to break through a window. I love that. before you find your cheerleaders, all these really essential steps before you find your posse, that there is a choice that you have. And I think for a long time especially, I was the daughter of a really powerful, impressive guy. And love you, Dad. And I think when you're surrounded that, first of all, I was incredibly lucky, and I lived a really privileged life, and I don't have much to complain about. I will say, though, that when you're around really impressive people, you tend to question your worth. Are you impressive? Is what you have to say at the dinner table worth anything? And it took me a second to realize that I could do things other than make them laugh. I felt my value was to be humorous, to be funny for a long time. And it took me a second to discover that I had a choice even to turn on the other part of myself, that my story was worth something too. And that choice is something that if you're ever sitting around and you feel a little tickle inside of you that maybe something more is calling to you, that you should flirt with that choice, because you do have a right to explore it. And what you do with it, break through a window, make it happen.
I love it. And I would just add to all of this incredible, uplifting advice as, really get behind causes that you care about in your community that support and uplift women, rally other women and men around those causes, and work to lift each other up. Because this is a pretty powerful group of people, and I feel a movement often when I see a lot of people like this coming together. But this day is about renewing our commitment to these causes, and I appreciate all the time this panel took to educate us and inspire us and uplift us tonight. And thank you all for coming. We have a very special guest as a final wrap-up to the night. One of the areas where we see a huge amount of gender disparities in the US especially is in music. It is very difficult for singers and artists, songwriters, and particularly producers to climb their way to the charts. They claw their way. This woman tonight happened to be performing in a parking garage. And she was gonna do anything she could to get her voice out there. And someone filmed her performing I Dreamed a Dream in a parking garage in Santa Barbara. They put it online. It got hundreds of thousands of views. And American Idol called her up. Her name is Michaela McCall. She's on this season of American Idol. She also, I know, in her day job is teaching music. She's got an incredible music repertoire, and she teaches probably many families here, your children take from Michaela. And she's an incredible teacher as well. And Michaela, I know you can't share with us what happens on this season, but I want you to know we all have your back. And we're so excited you're here. So if you wouldn't mind coming up. I'll let you get set up. The statistic is unbelievable, I just read. So just 3% of producers in the music industry were women in 2022. Yes, largely underrepresented in songwriting as well, and also in performing. So it is amazing to have Michaela here. She has been all over the news of the past few weeks. Her episode was last week, and I think she's making it to Hollywood Week. And when are you going to be on next?
I believe in another 3 weeks I should be on again.
Okay. And your audition was for Katy Perry and Lionel and Luke in this room?
Yeah, it was right here. This is my second time ever coming here. So. Better sound here. This is song by Dido. It's called Thank You. My tea's gone cold, I'm wondering why
I got out of bed at all. The morning rain clouds up my window, and I can't see it all. And even if I could, it would all be great. But your picture on my wall, it reminds me that it's not so bad, it's not so bad. And I want to thank you for giving me the best day of my life. No, just to be with you is having the best day of my life. Push the door, I'm home at last, and I'm soaking through and through. Then you handed me a towel, and all I see is you. And even if my house fell down now, I wouldn't have a clue, because you're near me. And I want to thank you for giving me the best day of my life. Oh, just to be with you is having the best day of my life. Best day of my life.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Michaela, for sharing your talent with us. I also would like to thank Brandy Rose. Are you still here, Brandy? Brandy was our performer. She's also an artist in Santa Barbara, and she performed during the reception. Thank you. If you were a volunteer tonight, and I know we have so many youth volunteers, can you stand up? And also, the ShelterBox staff members, can you please stand up? Thank you. Thank you to the volunteers. Thank you to the team. Thank you for believing in these events. Thank you for continuing to support them. They're growing each and every year, and it just really, really is palpable just how much and how powerful we can do together. So thank you for being here, and thank you to this incredible panel for making this year so special.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. If you have questions about Giving List Women, if you have questions about Access California, we're going to be here for a few minutes. I'd love for everyone, if you have questions and you want to learn about these amazing organizations and nonprofits, come up and see us. But thank you so much for being here, and good night.